Emma Martinez stared at the velvet jewelry box in her sister's hands, watching Victoria slide their grandmother's emerald ring onto her perfectly manicured finger. The afternoon sunlight streaming through the dining room window made the precious stones sparkle, casting tiny rainbows across the mahogany table where the rest of Grandma Elena's collection lay spread out like treasures from a pirate's chest. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. It fits perfectly, Victoria announced, extending her hand to admire the ring. Grandma Elena always said I had her hands. Emma's mother, Carmen, clasped her hands together in delight. Oh, darling, you look just like her when she was young. She would be so happy to know her jewelry found its way to someone who truly appreciates fine things. The words stung more than Emma cared to admit. She watched from the corner of the dining room as her parents carefully placed each piece into Victoria's awaiting hands. The sapphire necklace that Grandma Elena wore to every family gathering, the pearl earrings from her wedding day, the diamond bracelet she claimed brought her luck in everything she touched. All of it flowing toward Victoria like water finding its natural course. Emma's father, Roberto, picked up a delicate gold chain with a small pendant. This was your grandmother's confirmation gift. She wore it every day for 60 years. He fastened it around Victoria's neck with the reverence of a priest handling holy relics. What about Emma? The question came from her Uncle Miguel, Grandma Elena's youngest son, who had been quietly observing from the doorway. His voice cut through the family's collective admiration like a blade. Carmen barely glanced in Emma's direction. Emma understands that Victoria has always been closer to her grandmother. She spent every summer helping Elena in the garden, learning her recipes, listening to her stories. The jewelry should go to someone who truly cherished that relationship. Emma felt the familiar weight of invisibility settle over her shoulders. It was true that Victoria had spent those summers with Grandma Elena, but Emma had been working double shifts at the local diner to help pay for her art supplies and community college classes. Someone in the family had to be practical, her parents always said. Someone had to think about the future instead of dwelling on the past. But what they didn't mention was how Emma had visited Grandma Elena every Tuesday evening for the last 5 years of her life, when Victoria was busy with her marketing career in the city. How Emma had held her grandmother's hand during chemotherapy sessions while Victoria sent flowers from 2 states away. How Emma had been the one to find Grandma Elena's hidden journals and photo albums after the funeral, carefully preserving the family history that everyone else seemed eager to forget. Elena left specific instructions about her belongings, Uncle Miguel continued, his weathered hands fidgeting with his car keys. Did anyone actually read her will thoroughly? Roberto waved dismissively. Miguel, we've been through this. The will mentioned her jewelry collection going to her granddaughters. Victoria is the responsible one, the one who understands the value of these pieces. Emma can have some of the less valuable items if she wants. Less valuable items? Emma bit her tongue to keep from responding. Everything about her existence in this family seemed to fall into that category. Her art was less valuable than Victoria's corporate success. Her quiet nature was less valuable than Victoria's social butterfly charm. Her genuine care for Grandma Elena apparently mattered less than Victoria's summer garden parties and recipe exchanges. Uncle Miguel's expression darkened. Roberto, I think you need to actually read what Elena wrote, not just skim it for what you want to see. We read it, Carmen snapped, her voice taking on the sharp edge it always carried when someone questioned her decisions. Elena wanted her jewelry to go to the granddaughter who would appreciate it most. That's clearly Victoria. Emma watched her sister examine each piece with the analytical eye of someone cataloging valuable assets, rather than cherishing family heirlooms. Victoria held up the emerald ring to the light, already calculating its worth. She'd mentioned several times how the jewelry would look perfect with her new wardrobe, how impressed her friends would be at the country club fundraisers. The thing is, Uncle Miguel said slowly, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket, I found this in Elena's bedroom when I was helping clean out her house last week. It was tucked inside her Bible, marked with about 20 bookmarks. I think she wanted to make sure someone would find it. The room fell silent, except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. Emma recognized that clock. It had belonged to her great-grandfather, and Grandma Elena used to tell her stories about how its chimes marked every important moment in their family's history: the births, the marriages, the deaths, the celebrations, the heartbreaks. All of it measured by those steady, relentless ticks. Roberto snatched the paper from Miguel's hand, his face already flushing with annoyance. What is this supposed to be? It's a letter, in Elena's handwriting, addressed to Emma. Emma's heart stopped. Around the table, her family frozen in tableau. Victoria's hand suspended over the diamond bracelet. Carmen's mouth slightly open in surprise. Roberto's eyes scanning the document with growing alarm. "Read it out loud," Miguel said quietly. "Elena spent weeks writing that letter. I think everyone should hear what she had to say." Roberto's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the letter. Emma could see Grandma Elena's distinctive handwriting, still elegant despite the arthritis that had gnarled her fingers in her final years. The same handwriting that had filled birthday cards with encouraging words when Emma's parents were too busy to notice her achievements. The same handwriting that had labeled jars of homemade jam and packages of cookies that mysteriously appeared on her doorstep during her most difficult times. "My dearest Emma," Roberto began, his voice already lacking its usual confidence. "If you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer with you, and it also means that someone in our family has done exactly what I feared they would do. I pray that I am wrong, but I know human nature, and I know the dynamics of our family too well to hope otherwise." Victoria set down the jewelry she'd been examining. The clink of metal against wood seemed unnaturally loud in the suddenly tense room. Roberto continued reading, though Emma could see him scanning ahead, his expression growing more troubled with each line. "I want you to know that I have watched you carefully over the years, my precious granddaughter. While others saw you as quiet and unremarkable, I saw your true heart. I saw how you worked tirelessly to support yourself through school while maintaining your compassion for others. I saw how you visited me faithfully every week, even when you were exhausted from work and studies. I saw how you listened to my stories with genuine interest, not just polite obligation." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Even from beyond the grave, Grandma Elena saw her, really saw her. "I also saw how your parents consistently favored your sister, how they dismissed your achievements and minimized your dreams. I watched them mold Victoria into their image of success while treating you as an afterthought. This pattern has broken my heart for years, but I remained silent because I did not want to interfere with your parents' choices. However, I refuse to let this injustice continue into the next generation." Carmen's face had gone pale. "Roberto, stop reading. This is obviously the ramblings of an elderly woman who was confused near the end." "She wasn't confused," Miguel said firmly. "Elena was sharp as a tack until the day she died. She planned every word of this letter." Roberto's voice grew quieter as he continued. "Emma, my darling girl, I need you to know that the jewelry collection your family is probably fighting over right now is not your real inheritance from me. That jewelry, while beautiful and valuable, was always meant to be a test, a way to see if your parents would continue their pattern of favoritism even in my absence." The room fell so silent that Emma could hear her own heartbeat. Victoria's hand was now clutched around the emerald ring as if someone might try to take it from her. "Your real inheritance, my sweet Emma, is hidden in my house. In the attic, behind the old trunk where I kept my wedding dress, you will find a safety deposit box key taped to the inside of the wall. The box number is written on the back of this letter, along with the name of the bank. Inside that box, you will find documents that explain everything." Roberto turned the letter over, his hands now visibly shaking. Written in Grandma Elena's careful script was the name of a bank Emma had never heard of, along with the box number and what appeared to be a combination. "I have spent the last 30 years of my life quietly investing the money your grandfather left me. While everyone assumed I was just a simple widow living on Social Security, I was actually building something much more substantial. The total value of your inheritance, Emma, is approximately $2.3 million. Victoria dropped the emerald ring. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp crack, the sound echoing through the stunned silence like a gunshot. Carmen grabbed the letter from Roberto's hands, her eyes racing over the words, as if she could somehow change them through sheer force of will. "This can't be real. Elena never had that kind of money. She lived in that tiny house, drove that ancient car, wore the same clothes for years. Because she was saving every penny, Miguel said, his voice filled with pride for his mother's discipline. Elena always said that real wealth wasn't about showing off. It was about security and the ability to help the people you love when they need it most. Roberto sank into his chair, the color draining from his face as the implications hit him. $2.3 million. Emma stared at the letter in her mother's hands, unable to process what she just heard. The number seemed impossible, like something from a dream or a movie, not from her real life where she clipped coupons and worked overtime to afford her art supplies. Victoria finally found her voice. There has to be a mistake. Grandma Elena wouldn't have hidden this from the family. She would have told us if she had that kind of money. Would she? Emma asked quietly, speaking for the first time since the letter reading began. Would she have told a family that consistently ignored one daughter while lavishing attention on the other? Would she have trusted her secret to parents who stole every moment of recognition from their younger child and handed it to their favorite? The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire that had been smoldering for years. Emma had never spoken so directly about the family dynamics that had shaped her entire life. She had always been the accommodating one, the understanding one, the one who swallowed her hurt and made excuses for everyone else's behavior. Carmen's face flushed red. That's not fair, Emma. We never stole anything from you. We simply recognized Victoria's natural talents and supported her accordingly. Natural talents, Emma repeated, tasting the bitterness of those words. Like the natural talent of being born first? The natural talent of looking like Dad's side of the family? The natural talent of wanting the same things you and Dad wanted? Roberto tried to regain control of the situation. Emma, you're being dramatic. We've always supported both of you girls equally. Emma laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Equally? Victoria got a car for her 16th birthday. I got a lecture about responsibility and a bus pass. Victoria got her college tuition paid in full. I got a part-time job and student loans. Victoria got a down payment on her first apartment. I got told that struggle builds character. We helped Victoria because she was focused on her future. You were always so scattered, so impractical with your art and your dreams. We thought tough love would help you develop some direction. The only direction I developed was away from this family, Emma said, her voice growing stronger with each word. And apparently, Grandma Elena noticed. Uncle Miguel stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Emma's shoulder. Elena talked to me about this plan several times over the past few years. She was heartbroken watching how you were treated, Emma. She wanted to make sure that at least one person in this family recognized your worth. Victoria, who had been silent since dropping the ring, finally exploded. This is insane. Emma doesn't know anything about managing money. She'll waste it all on art supplies and impractical dreams. At least I have a career, a plan for the future. Emma turned to face her sister fully for the first time that day. Victoria looked perfect, as always. Her hair was professionally styled, her makeup flawless, her clothes expensive and carefully chosen. She looked like success, like everything their parents had always wanted in a daughter. But Emma saw something else now. She saw fear in Victoria's eyes. Fear that maybe, for once, she wouldn't be the chosen one. Fear that someone else in the family might be valued more than her. Fear that all her advantages might not be enough to maintain her position as the golden child. You're right, Victoria, Emma said calmly. I don't know much about managing large amounts of money, but I know something about working for every dollar I've ever earned. I know something about making sacrifices for the people I love, and I know something about being grateful for unexpected blessings instead of assuming they're my natural right. Roberto stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and staring out at the street where Grandma Elena's house sat empty, waiting for them to finish settling her affairs. We need to verify this before anyone gets too excited. Letters can be forged, accounts can be closed, elderly people can be confused about their finances. Elena wasn't confused about anything, Miguel said sharply. She showed me the account statements last year when she was updating her will. She wanted someone in the family to know the truth, just in case something happened to her before she could tell Emma directly. Emma felt a strange mixture of grief and vindication washing over her. Grandma Elena had seen her, had valued her, had recognized that she deserved more than the scraps her parents had been willing to throw her way. But along with that recognition came a terrible sadness that her grandmother had felt the need to hide her love and support, to wait until death to reveal the truth about how she felt. Carmen was still studying the letter, as if she could find some loophole or hidden meaning that would change its contents. Even if this is real, Emma is only 26 years old. She's not mature enough to handle this kind of responsibility. The money should be held in trust, managed by the family until she's older. Managed by which family members? Emma asked pointedly. The ones who just spent the afternoon dividing up jewelry that apparently wasn't even the real inheritance? The ones who never thought to check if there might be more to Grandma Elena's estate than what was visible on the surface? Uncle Miguel pulled out his phone. I have the number for Elena's lawyer. She worked with him to set up the safety deposit box and update her will. Should I call him to confirm the details? The suggestion sent a visible panic through Emma's parents. Roberto started to object, but Victoria cut him off. Yes, call him, she said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. If this is real, we need to know. If it's not real, we need to stop wasting time on fantasies. As Miguel dialed the number, Emma found herself studying the scattered jewelry on the table. The pieces that had seemed so significant an hour ago now looked different to her. They were beautiful, certainly, valuable, undoubtedly, but they were also symbols of everything that was wrong with her family's priorities. The jewelry represented appearance over substance, tradition over innovation, conformity over authenticity. It represented the kind of inheritance that her parents understood and valued, tangible, displayable, designed to impress others and reinforce social status. But Grandma Elena's real gift to her was something much more subversive. It was validation. It was recognition. It was the kind of security that would allow Emma to pursue her dreams without constantly worrying about survival. It was freedom from the financial dependence that had kept her tethered to a family that had never truly appreciated her. Miguel finished his phone conversation and turned back to the group. His expression was serious but not surprised. Elena's lawyer confirmed everything. The safety deposit box exists, the account is real, and Emma is the sole beneficiary. He said Elena visited him 6 months ago to make sure all the paperwork was in order. She was very specific about wanting Emma to inherit everything, and she was equally specific about wanting the jewelry distribution to happen first as a kind of final test of the family's character. The grandfather clock chimed 4 times, marking another hour in the Martinez family history. But this time, the chime seemed to announce something different, not just the passage of time, but the end of one era and the beginning of another. Roberto slumped back into his chair, the fight suddenly gone out of him. $2.3 million, he repeated, as if saying the number might help him understand it better. Carmen was still clutching the letter, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the paper. This changes everything. The family business, Victoria's wedding plans, the house renovations we were planning. Emma looked at her mother with a mixture of pity and disgust. Even now, faced with evidence of their years of favoritism and neglect, Carmen's first thoughts were about how this unexpected development might benefit the family's existing plans and priorities. No, Mom, Emma said quietly. This doesn't change anything for you. This is Grandma Elena's gift to me, her recognition of me as an individual, not as a member of a family that never valued me anyway. Victoria finally bent to pick up the emerald ring she had dropped, examining it for damage. The symbolism wasn't lost on Emma. Even after learning about the real inheritance, Victoria's instinct was to protect the jewelry she had claimed for herself. Emma, Victoria said, her voice taking on the persuasive tone she used in her marketing career. We're still family. We should work together on this. I have experience with investments and financial planning. I could help you manage the money responsibly. Emma almost laughed at the transparent attempt at manipulation. You mean you could help me manage the money the same way Mom and Dad helped me manage my college education, by making all the important decisions for me while convincing me it was for my own good? Uncle Miguel folded the letter carefully and handed it back to Emma. Your grandmother left specific instructions about the money, too. She wanted you to know that it comes with no strings attached and no family obligations. She said you've spent enough of your life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Those words hit Emma like a physical blow. The truth of them was so stark, so undeniable, that she had to sit down to absorb their impact. She had spent her entire life trying to earn love that should have been given freely. Every good grade, every responsible choice, every sacrifice she had made for the family's benefit had been an attempt to prove she was worthy of the affection that Victoria received simply by existing. Roberto cleared his throat, obviously struggling to find the right words. Emma, sweetheart, I think there's been some misunderstanding about how your mother and I feel about you. We love both our daughters equally. Do you? Emma asked, her voice dangerously calm. Then why did you assume the jewelry should go to Victoria without even asking what I might want? Why did you dismiss Uncle Miguel's questions about Grandma Elena's actual wishes? Why are you already talking about family business and Victoria's wedding plans instead of acknowledging that I just inherited a life-changing amount of money? The questions hung in the air unanswered because they were unanswerable. The evidence of 26 years of favoritism couldn't be explained away with platitudes about equal love. Carmen tried a different approach. Emma, honey, you have to understand that we were trying to prepare you for the real world. We gave Victoria more support because we thought she needed it less. We were harder on you because we knew you were stronger. Emma shook her head in amazement. Do you even hear yourself, Mom? You're saying you gave Victoria more support because she needed it less, and you gave me less support because I was stronger? How does that make any sense? The questions hung in the air unanswered because they were unanswerable. The evidence of 26 years of favoritism couldn't be explained away with platitudes about equal love. Carmen tried a different approach. Emma, honey, you have to understand that we were trying to prepare you for the real world. We gave Victoria more support because we thought she needed it less. We were harder on you because we knew you were stronger. Emma shook her head in amazement. Do you even hear yourself, Mom? You're saying you gave Victoria more support because she needed it less, and you gave me less support because I was stronger? How does that make any sense?
We wanted you to be independent, Roberto added weakly. I am independent, Emma replied. I've been independent since I was 16 years old and got my first job. I've been independent through every struggle, every challenge, every disappointment. What you wanted was to not have to support two daughters equally. It was easier to focus on Victoria and tell yourselves I was better off fending for myself. Victoria set down the jewelry she'd been examining and looked directly at her sister for the first time since the letter reading. Emma, I never asked them to treat me differently than you. I never wanted you to feel left out or unloved. Emma studied her sister's face, searching for sincerity behind the perfectly applied makeup and practiced expressions. Maybe you didn't ask for it, Victoria, but you never questioned it either. You never wondered why I was working while you got an allowance. You never asked why I took out student loans while your tuition was paid in full. You accepted the advantages without ever considering what they cost me. I thought you preferred being independent, Victoria said defensively. You always seemed so capable, so self-sufficient. I thought you didn't need the same kind of help I did. Emma stood up, walking to the window where she could see Grandma Elena's house across the street. The small, modest home where her grandmother had lived simply while quietly accumulating the means to change her granddaughter's life forever. I did need help, Victoria. I needed parents who celebrated my achievements instead of minimizing them. I needed a family that saw my art as a gift instead of a waste of time. I needed to know that my dreams mattered just as much as yours did. But most of all, I needed to know that I was loved for who I was, not despite who I was. The room fell silent again. Emma could feel her family's discomfort, their struggle to reconcile this new information with the narrative they had constructed about their relationships and choices. She almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Uncle Miguel broke the silence. Elena wanted me to give you something else, Emma. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small wrapped package. She said to wait until after the letter was read. Emma took the package with trembling hands. It was wrapped in tissue paper and tied with a faded ribbon. Inside, she found a small wooden box, hand-carved with intricate flowers and vines. She recognized it immediately. It had sat on Grandma Elena's dresser for as long as Emma could remember, holding her grandmother's most precious keepsakes. Inside the box was a photograph Emma had never seen before. It showed a young woman standing in front of an easel, paintbrush in hand, smiling at the camera with joy and confidence radiating from every line of her face. The woman looked remarkably like Emma, but the clothing and hairstyle were from decades earlier. "That's Elena when she was your age," Miguel explained. "She was an artist too, before she married your grandfather. She gave up painting when your father was born because your grandfather thought it was frivolous. She always regretted that decision." Emma turned the photograph over and found her grandmother's familiar handwriting once again. For Emma, who still has time to choose a different path. "Follow your dreams, my darling girl. I wish I had been brave enough to follow mine." The tears came then, hot and unstoppable. Not tears of grief exactly, but tears of recognition. Grandma Elena hadn't just left her money, she had left her permission. Permission to choose her own path, permission to value her own dreams, permission to stop trying to earn love from people who had already decided she wasn't worth their full attention. Carmen reached for the photograph, but Emma pulled it back protectively. "She was beautiful," Carmen said softly. "I never knew Elena had been an artist." "There are a lot of things about Grandma Elena that you never knew," Emma replied, carefully placing the photograph back in its box. "Just like there are a lot of things about me that you've never bothered to learn." Roberto stood up, his face flushed with a combination of embarrassment and anger. "Emma, I think you're being unfair. We've always been proud of your artistic abilities. Proud enough to pay for art classes? Proud enough to attend my gallery showings? Proud enough to display my work in your home?" Emma shook her head. "No, Dad. You've been tolerant of my artistic abilities. There's a difference." Victoria was examining the scattered jewelry again, as if she could somehow will the conversation back to safer territory. "What happens now? Do we need to call lawyers? Do we need to change the estate planning?" Emma looked at her sister with something approaching pity. Even now, even after everything that had been revealed, Victoria's primary concern was the logistics of inheritance, rather than the emotional devastation that had been laid bare in this room. "I don't know what happens now," Emma admitted. "I need time to process all of this. I need to understand what Grandma Elena really wanted for me, and I need to figure out what I want for myself." Miguel handed her a business card. "This is Elena's lawyer's information. He said to call him whenever you're ready to access the safety deposit box. There's no rush." Emma took the card, noticing how solid and real it felt in her hand. Proof that this wasn't a dream or a fantasy, but an actual opportunity to rewrite the story of her life. Carmen made one more attempt at control. "Emma, sweetheart, promise me you won't make any major decisions without talking to the family first. This kind of money can be dangerous if it's not handled properly." Emma looked around the room at her family, her parents, who had spent 26 years proving that they couldn't be trusted to handle her dreams properly. Her sister, who had never questioned why she deserved more than Emma did. Her uncle, who had kept Grandma Elena's secret, but had also watched years of favoritism without speaking up until now. "I promise," Emma said quietly, "that I will make my decisions based on what's best for me. For the first time in my life, I'm going to prioritize my own needs and dreams." She picked up the jewelry box containing Grandma Elena's photograph and the lawyer's business card. "I think I should go now. I have a lot to think about." As she walked toward the door, Victoria called out, "Emma, wait."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
"What about the jewelry? I mean, do you want any of it?" Emma paused, looking back at the scattered pieces on the dining room table. The emerald ring with its tiny crack from being dropped, the sapphire necklace that Victoria had been wearing when she arrived, the pearl earrings that had been their great-grandmother's pride and joy. "Keep it," Emma said finally. "All of it. Consider it Grandma Elena's final gift to the family that never questioned whether they deserved it." She left them there, sitting around the mahogany table with their hollow victories spread out before them.
The jewelry that had seemed so important an hour ago now looked like exactly what it was: beautiful, valuable objects that couldn't fill the emotional void at the center of their family relationships. As Emma crossed the street toward Grandma Elena's house, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt seen. She felt valued. She felt like someone had finally recognized that her dreams were worth investing in. The key to the front door was still hidden under the ceramic frog by the porch steps, just as it had been for all the years Emma had been visiting. Inside, the house smelled like lavender and old books, like all the Tuesday evenings Emma had spent listening to her grandmother's stories while Victoria was busy with her important career. Emma climbed a narrow stairs to the attic, her heart pounding with anticipation and grief in equal measure. Behind the trunk where Grandma Elena had kept her wedding dress, Emma found exactly what the letter had promised: a small key taped to the inside of the wall, along with detailed instructions in her grandmother's handwriting. As she held the key up to the fading afternoon light, Emma realized that this was more than just access to a bank account. This was her grandmother's final act of rebellion against a family system that had consistently undervalued the wrong daughter. This was justice, delivered from beyond the grave by the one person who had truly understood what it meant to sacrifice your dreams for other people's expectations. Emma smiled, and for the first time since Grandma Elena's funeral, it was a smile of pure joy. Tomorrow, she would visit the bank. Tomorrow, she would begin to understand the full extent of her inheritance. But today, she would sit in her grandmother's house and allow herself to feel the weight of being truly loved and valued. Outside, the grandfather clock in her parents' dining room chimed 5 times, marking another hour in the Martinez family history. But Emma was no longer listening to that clock. She was listening to her own heart, finally free to beat to its own rhythm. Emma stood outside First National Bank at exactly 9 o'clock Monday morning, the safety deposit box key clutched so tightly in her palm that it left an imprint on her skin. She had spent the entire weekend in Grandma Elena's house, reading through old journals and photo albums, trying to piece together the life her grandmother had lived in secret while everyone else saw only a simple widow getting by on Social Security. The journals revealed a woman of remarkable intelligence and business acumen. Elena had been tracking stock markets, researching investment opportunities, and corresponding with financial advisors for decades. She had turned her late husband's modest life insurance payout into a substantial portfolio through careful planning and patient reinvestment. Most shocking of all, she had been quietly supporting other family members and community causes for years, always anonymously, always careful not to reveal the source of her generosity. Emma discovered that her own art supplies in high school had been mysteriously funded by Grandma Elena. The scholarship to the community art program that Emma had assumed was need-based had actually been privately sponsored by her grandmother. Even the part-time job at the frame shop that had seemed like such lucky timing had been arranged through Elena's quiet connections in the local art community. Her grandmother had been orchestrating Emma's artistic development from the shadows, providing opportunities and support while allowing Emma to believe she was earning everything through her own merit. It was a gift within a gift, preserving Emma's independence and self-respect while ensuring she had the resources to pursue her passion. Mr. Davidson, Elena's lawyer, was waiting for Emma in the bank's private consultation room. He was a thin man with kind eyes who had clearly held great affection for her grandmother. "Elena spoke about you constantly," he said, as they walked toward the safety deposit boxes. "She was incredibly proud of your artistic achievements, your work ethic, your character. She often said you reminded her of herself at that age, before life convinced her to abandon her dreams." They descended into the bank's basement vault, where rows of numbered boxes lined the walls like small metal coffins. Box 847 was located in the far corner, requiring 2 keys to open. Emma inserted her key while Mr. Davidson used the bank's master key, and together they turned them in synchronized motion. Inside the narrow metal drawer were documents that would redefine Emma's understanding of not just her inheritance, but her entire family history. Bank statements showing monthly deposits going back 30 years, investment portfolios with companies Emma recognized from business news, real estate deeds for properties she had never heard Elena mention, insurance policies with beneficiaries carefully specified. But the most devastating discovery was a thick manila folder labeled Family Support 1995 to 2023. Inside were canceled checks, money transfer receipts, and detailed records showing that Elena had been secretly subsidizing Roberto and Carmen's lifestyle for decades. Emma's hands shook as she reviewed the documents. Her parents' mortgage payments, car loans, Victoria's private school tuition, the family vacations Emma had been told they couldn't afford to include her on, all of it had been quietly funded by Grandma Elena's growing fortune, while Emma worked double shifts to pay for her community college classes and lived on ramen noodles to afford art supplies. "Your grandmother wanted you to see these records," Mr. Davidson explained gently. "She felt it was important for you to understand the complete financial picture of your family's situation." Emma found her voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. "They told me we couldn't afford for me to go to art school. They said the family budget was stretched thin with Victoria's education costs. But they were lying." "Not lying exactly," Mr. Davidson corrected. "Your parents genuinely believed they were living within their means. Elena was very careful to structure her support in ways that looked like fortunate circumstances, rather than direct assistance. Anonymous scholarship funds, coincidental job opportunities, unexpected insurance payouts that covered emergencies." Emma continued reading through the files, her anger building with each revelation. In 2018, when Emma's art was featured in a local gallery exhibition, she had desperately needed $300 for professional framing and promotional materials. Her parents had refused to help, citing tight finances and questioning whether the exhibition was worth the investment. That same week, according to Elena's records, Roberto had received a mysterious bonus from his employer, a bonus that had actually been arranged and funded by Elena through a complex series of corporate donations and grants. The bonus had been spent on a weekend golf trip with his friends, while Emma had worked overtime at the diner to afford the gallery expenses herself. She documented everything, Emma realized, her voice growing stronger with her anger. "Every sacrifice I made that I didn't need to make, every struggle that could have been avoided. Every time they chose Victoria's comfort over my opportunities while having access to resources they were hiding from me." Mr. Davidson nodded grimly. "Elena was building a case, Emma. Not a legal case, but a moral one. She wanted you to have concrete evidence of the pattern of favoritism and deception, so that when this day came, you would understand that your feelings of being overlooked and undervalued were completely justified." At the bottom of the folder was a letter addressed to Emma in Elena's handwriting, dated just 6 months before her death. Emma opened it with trembling hands, already emotional from the weight of the revelations. "My dearest Emma," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then you have discovered the full extent of your parents' deception. And more importantly, you have discovered the truth about your own worth. I need you to understand that every dollar I spent supporting this family over the years was spent willingly, out of love and concern for their well-being. But I also need you to understand that the way they chose to distribute that support between you and your sister was entirely their decision, and it broke my heart every single day." Emma wiped tears from her eyes before continuing to read. "I could have intervened more directly. I could have demanded that they treat you equally. Or I could have openly sponsored your education and artistic development. But I was afraid that open conflict would drive them to cut off your relationship with me entirely, and you were the light of my life, Emma. I was selfish in wanting to preserve our Tuesday evening visits and our quiet talks about art and dreams in the future." The letter went on to detail Elena's careful financial planning for Emma's inheritance. She had structured everything to be tax-efficient and immediately accessible. There were instructions for working with specific financial advisors who had been managing her portfolio. There were suggestions for investment strategies that would ensure the money would last Emma's entire lifetime and beyond. But most importantly, there were Elena's hopes and dreams for Emma's future. "I want you to use this money to become the artist I never had the courage to be," Elena wrote. "I want you to travel to Paris and study the masters I only saw in books. I want you to rent a studio large enough for the sculptures you've always dreamed of creating. I want you to never again have to choose between paying rent and buying art supplies. I want you to be free, Emma, free from financial worry, free from family obligation, free from the need to earn love that should be given unconditionally." The letter concluded with specific instructions about revealing the inheritance to the family. You will need to decide how and when to tell your parents about this money, Elena wrote. I suggest you wait until you have had time to process your emotions and make your own plans. They will try to guilt you, manipulate you, and convince you that family obligation requires you to share this windfall with them. Remember that they had access to family resources for decades and chose to exclude you from that access. You owe them nothing. Emma folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the folder. Around her, the bank vault felt like a tomb, filled with the secrets and lies that had shaped her entire life. But it also felt like a birth chamber, the place where her new life would begin. Mr. Davidson had been patiently waiting while she processed the information. Now he pulled out another set of documents from his briefcase. There are some additional items your grandmother wanted you to have, he said. Property deeds, for instance. Elena owned several rental properties that have been professionally managed for years. The income from those properties alone is substantial enough to support most people comfortably. Emma stared at the property addresses: 2 apartment buildings in the downtown arts district, a small commercial space that was currently leased to a pottery studio, a cottage in the mountains that Elena had apparently used as a private retreat, though Emma had never heard her mention it. She owned real estate too? Elena was a very savvy investor, Mr. Davidson explained. She understood that diversification was key to building lasting wealth. The properties provide steady income, the investment accounts provide growth potential, and there are also some more liquid assets for immediate needs. He handed Emma a bank card. This account has been set up for your immediate use. There's $50,000 available right now, no questions asked, no paperwork required beyond your signature. Elena wanted to make sure you could make any necessary changes to your life situation immediately. Emma looked at the bank card like it was a foreign object. $50,000 available immediately. More money than she had ever imagined having access to, and it was just the beginning. What happens next? She asked. That's entirely up to you, Mr. Davidson replied. Elena has left you financially independent for life if you choose to be. You could travel, you could go back to school, you could open your own art studio, you could do absolutely nothing and live comfortably off the investment income. The choice is yours. Emma spent the next hour signing papers and establishing her access to the various accounts and properties. With each signature, she felt like she was signing away her old life and stepping into something entirely new and unknown. When they finally emerged from the bank vault, Emma felt disoriented by the normal world continuing around them. People were going about their Monday morning routines, getting coffee, heading to work, dealing with the same everyday concerns that had dominated Emma's life just hours ago. None of them knew that her entire existence had just been transformed. Mr. Davidson walked her to her car, an ancient Honda Civic that had been her reliable companion through years of financial struggle. Elena left you one more gift, he said, handing her an envelope. She said not to open it until you were alone after you had processed everything else. Emma drove to the small apartment she rented on the edge of town, the apartment she had been so proud to afford on her own, the apartment that now seemed like a symbol of all the unnecessary struggles she had endured. She sat in her car in the parking lot, staring at the building that had been her sanctuary and refuge, realizing that she never had to live within those narrow financial constraints again. Inside her apartment, Emma sat on the second-hand couch she had bought from a thrift store and opened a final envelope. Inside was a plane ticket to Paris, dated for the following week, along with a reservation confirmation for a small hotel in Montmartre. There was also a handwritten note. Emma, I have always dreamed of walking through the Louvre, of seeing the places where the great artists lived and worked, of understanding art in the context of the city that has nurtured so many creative souls. I never took this trip because I was too afraid, too practical, too convinced that dreams were luxuries I couldn't afford. I don't want you to make the same mistake. The hotel reservation is for 1 month. Consider it your first assignment as an independently wealthy woman. Learn to dream big. Emma held the plane ticket with shaking hands. Paris, 1 week from today. A month in the city she had fantasized about since she first learned about Impressionist painting in high school. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Victoria. Mom wants to know if you've thought more about the jewelry situation. She feels bad about how things went yesterday and wants to make sure you're okay. Emma stared at the message, thinking about all the times over the years when Victoria had served as the messenger for their parents' guilt or manipulation, always framing their self-interest as concern for Emma's well-being, always positioning their control as care. She typed back, "I'm fine. Tell Mom I don't need the jewelry. I have everything I need now." Within minutes, her phone was ringing. Carmen's name appeared on the screen, and Emma realized she felt no obligation to answer. For the first time in her life, she had the power to simply ignore her mother's demands for immediate attention and compliance. The phone went to voicemail, then rang again, then buzzed with text messages. "Emma, honey, please call me back. I'm worried about you. Your father and I want to take you to dinner tonight. We need to talk as a family. Emma, it's not healthy to shut out the people who love you.
Please respond." Emma turned off her phone and walked to the easel in the corner of her studio apartment. The painting she had been working on for months sat there unfinished, a landscape of the mountains she could see from her bedroom window. She had been painting it in stolen moments between work shifts and family obligations, never having enough uninterrupted time to really lose herself in the creative process. Now she had all the time in the world. She picked up her brushes and began to paint, really paint, for the first time in years. Not rushing to finish before her next shift, not worrying about the cost of the paint she was using, not calculating whether she could afford new brushes when these wore out. Just painting. Hours passed without Emma noticing. The mountain landscape transformed under her hands, becoming more vibrant and alive than anything she had created before. She was so absorbed in her work that she didn't hear the knocking at her door until it became persistent and demanding. "Emma, we know you're in there. Your car is in the parking lot." Roberto's voice carried through the thinned apartment door. "Emma, please open the door. We need to discuss this inheritance situation as a family." Carmen's voice joined her husband's. Emma continued painting, adding details to the sky that she had never had the patience to include before. The knocking continued, growing more aggressive. "Emma Maria Martinez, you open this door right now. This behavior is completely unacceptable." Carmen's voice had taken on the sharp, authoritative tone that had cowed Emma into compliance for 26 years. But this time, Emma felt no compulsion to obey. She was no longer dependent on their approval, their support, or their acceptance. She could afford to lose their love because she finally understood that she had never truly had it in the first place. The knocking stopped, replaced by the sound of voices conferring in the hallway. Emma heard footsteps retreating and assumed they had given up. But 10 minutes later, the apartment manager was knocking on her door. "Miss Martinez, your parents are here with me. They're concerned about your welfare and asked me to do a wellness check." Emma set down her brushes and walked to the door, but didn't open it. "I'm fine, Mr. Peterson. I'm just busy working on a painting. Please tell my parents that I'm not available for visitors right now." "Emma, honey, please," Carmen's voice came through the door. "We just want to make sure you're okay. You haven't been answering your phone, and after yesterday's emotional revelations, we're worried about your mental state." Emma almost laughed at the manipulation. Now she was mentally unstable for wanting privacy and time to process life-changing information. Now her desire for independence was a sign of psychological distress rather than healthy boundary setting. "I'm perfectly fine," called through the door. "I'm having a normal reaction to discovering that my family has been lying to me for decades. I need some time to process that information without interference." "We never lied to you," Roberto protested. "We may not have told you everything about the family finances, but we never outright lied." Emma opened the door then, not to let them in, but to look her father directly in the eyes as she spoke. "You told me we couldn't afford for me to go to art school while secretly receiving money from Grandma Elena that could have easily paid for my education. You told me that struggle builds character while allowing Victoria to live without struggle. You told me that family comes first while consistently putting me last. If those aren't lies, then what would you call them?" Roberto's face flushed red. "We were trying to teach you responsibility and self-reliance. Victoria needed more support because she was more fragile, more dependent on family approval." And what did I need, Dad? What did your younger daughter need that you never bothered to provide? The question hung in the air between them. Roberto opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. Behind him, Carmen was wringing her hands, her perfectly composed facade cracking under the weight of direct confrontation. "We need to discuss the inheritance," Carmen finally said, abandoning the pretense of concern for Emma's well-being. "That much money requires careful family planning. There are tax implications, investment decisions, estate planning considerations." "You mean there are ways you want to benefit from Grandma Elena's gift to me," Emma translated. "Ways you want to control how I use money that was left specifically to me, with specific instructions that it comes with no family obligations." "Don't be ridiculous," Carmen snapped. "We're your parents. We have a right to be involved in major financial decisions." Emma looked at her mother with something approaching pity. "You have exactly the rights I choose to give you. And right now, based on 26 years of evidence, I'm not inclined to give you any rights at all regarding my inheritance." She started to close the door, but Roberto put his foot in the way. "Emma, you're being unreasonable. We're family. We should be working together on this." "We're family?" Emma repeated. "You mean like when we were family and you chose to fund Victoria's entire education while I took out student loans? Like when we were family and you paid for Victoria's car while I worked extra shifts to afford bus fare? Like when we were family and you attended all of Victoria's work events while dismissing my art exhibitions as hobbies?" "That's different," Carmen protested weakly. "How is it different, Mom? Explain to me how it's different." Carmen struggled for words, her face cycling through various expressions as she searched for a justification that would make sense even to herself. "Victoria needed more support," she finally said. "She was building a career, establishing herself professionally." "And what was I doing? Playing house with crayons?" "You were pursuing art," Roberto said, as if that explained everything. "Art isn't a reliable career path. We were trying to encourage you toward more practical choices." Emma shook her head in amazement. "You were trying to control me toward the choices you wanted me to make, just like you're trying to control me now regarding the inheritance." "We're not trying to control you," Carmen insisted. "We're trying to help you make responsible decisions." "Help," Emma repeated.
Like you helped me with my education? Like you helped me with my career? Like you helped me feel valued and supported in this family? The questions were rhetorical, and they all knew it. The evidence of 26 years spoke for itself. Emma removed Roberto's foot from her doorway and began to close the door again. "I need time to think about my future without input from people who have never prioritized my well-being. When I'm ready to have a family conversation about this, I'll let you know." "Emma, wait," Victoria's voice came from the hallway. Emma hadn't realized her sister was there, lurking behind their parents like always, letting them do the confrontational work while she played the reasonable mediator. "What, Victoria?" "I just want you to know that I never wanted things to be unfair between us. I never asked for special treatment." Emma studied her sister's face, searching for genuine remorse or understanding. What she saw instead was the same entitled confusion that had always characterized Victoria's approach to their relationship. Victoria genuinely couldn't understand why Emma was upset about inequality that Victoria had never questioned or challenged. "You didn't ask for special treatment," Emma agreed, "but you accepted it. Year after year, opportunity after opportunity, advantage after advantage. You accepted it all without ever wondering what it cost me or whether I might deserve the same consideration." "I thought you were okay with how things were," Victoria said weakly. "You never complained." "I never complained because complaining changed nothing. Because every time I tried to express disappointment or hurt, I was told I was being dramatic or ungrateful or jealous. So I learned to keep my feelings to myself and work twice as hard for half the recognition." Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know how to fix this, Emma. I don't know how to make up for things that happened years ago." "You can't fix it," Emma said simply, "but you could stop trying to minimize it. You could acknowledge that it happened and that it was wrong. You could stop pretending that you didn't benefit enormously from a system that consistently disadvantaged me." "But we're still sisters."
Victoria said, her voice small and uncertain. "This inheritance thing doesn't have to change our relationship." Emma looked at her sister with something approaching grief. Victoria still didn't understand. She still thought this was about money, rather than about 26 years of accumulated emotional damage. "Our relationship was changed long before I knew about any inheritance," Emma said gently. "It was changed every time you got something I was denied. Every time you were celebrated while I was overlooked. Every time you accepted advantages without questioning whether they were fair." "So what happens now?" Victoria asked. Emma looked at her family standing in the hallway of her modest apartment building. Her parents, still trying to figure out how to regain control of a situation that had slipped entirely from their grasp. Her sister, still trying to maintain the comfortable fiction that their relationship had been equal and loving all along. "Now I make decisions based on what's best for me," Emma said. "For the first time in my life, I get to prioritize my own needs and dreams." She closed the door and turned the deadbolt, listening to their continued protests and pleas through the thin wood. But their words had lost all power over her. She was no longer the financially dependent daughter who had to choose between standing up for herself and maintaining family relationships. Emma returned to her easel, picking up her brushes and losing herself once again in the mountain landscape. Outside her apartment, she could hear her family's voices growing more distant as they finally gave up and left. For the first time in 26 years, Emma was truly alone with her own thoughts and dreams. And instead of feeling lonely or abandoned, she felt liberated. The plane ticket to Paris sat on her kitchen counter, a tangible symbol of possibilities she had never allowed herself to imagine. In 1 week, she would be walking through the Louvre, seeing the masterpieces she had only known from textbooks and online images. She would be living the dream that Grandma Elena had been too afraid to pursue. Emma painted until the sun set, then ordered takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant without checking her bank balance first. It was a small thing, but revolutionary for someone who had spent years calculating every expenditure down to the penny. As she ate her dinner and admired the day's painting progress, Emma realized that this was what freedom felt like. Not just financial freedom, though that was certainly part of it, but emotional freedom. The freedom to make choices based on her own values rather than other people's expectations. The freedom to prioritize her own dreams without guilt or justification. Her phone, which she had turned back on to order food, showed 17 missed calls and 34 text messages from various family members. Emma glanced at them briefly, noting the progression from concern to anger to attempted manipulation, then deleted them all without reading the details. She had a new life to plan, and she was finally free to plan it entirely on her own terms. That night, Emma packed her bags for Paris, carefully selecting the art supplies she would take with her. She fell asleep planning the paintings she would create, the galleries she would visit, the artistic techniques she would explore when money was no longer a limiting factor. For the first time in her adult life, Emma Martinez went to sleep excited about her future, instead of worried about her survival. And in the morning, she would begin the process of claiming everything that had always been rightfully hers. 6 months after discovering her inheritance, Emma stood in the sunlit studio she had rented in the heart of downtown's arts district, paintbrush in hand, putting the finishing touches on a canvas that would have been impossible for her to create in her old life. The painting depicted the view from her grandmother's attic window, but transformed into something magical and surreal, with light streaming through old lace curtains and illuminating floating objects that represented all the dreams Elena had hidden away. The studio space was everything Emma had ever imagined wanting. High ceilings, massive windows facing north for perfect natural light, enough room for both her easel work and the sculptural pieces she had finally begun creating. The rent alone cost more than her old apartment's total monthly expenses, but money was no longer a constraint that shaped her artistic vision. Emma had returned from Paris 3 months earlier, fundamentally changed by the experience of studying art without financial limitations. She had spent her mornings in the Louvre, her afternoons in smaller galleries, and her evenings in cafes sketching the faces of strangers who would never know they had inspired her work. She had taken private lessons with a master painter in Montmartre, learned techniques she had only read about in books, and most importantly, learned to think of herself as a serious artist rather than someone pursuing an expensive hobby.
The transformation hadn't been just artistic. Living alone in a foreign city, accountable to no one but herself, Emma had discovered who she was when stripped of family expectations and financial anxiety. She was braver than she had known, more decisive, more willing to take risks and trust her instincts. She was also funnier, more social, more willing to engage with strangers and form new friendships based on shared interests rather than family obligation. A knock at the studio door interrupted her painting. Through the frosted glass, Emma could see a familiar silhouette that made her stomach clench with old anxiety. Victoria stood in the hallway, holding what appeared to be a carefully prepared speech in her manicured hands. Emma had been expecting this visit eventually. Her family had left her alone during her time in Paris, but her return to the city had not gone unnoticed. Word traveled quickly in their social circles, especially when that word involved a significant change in someone's financial status and lifestyle. She opened the door to find Victoria dressed in her typical professional attire, looking polished and successful, but also nervous in a way Emma rarely remembered seeing her sister. "Your studio is beautiful," Victoria said, stepping inside and looking around with obvious awe. "I had no idea you were renting space downtown. This must be expensive." Emma returned to her easel without responding to the implied question about her finances. She had learned in Paris that she didn't owe anyone explanations about her choices, especially family members who had never shown genuine interest in her artistic pursuits until those pursuits became financially notable. Victoria wandered around the studio, examining the paintings Emma had completed since her return. The work was noticeably different from anything Emma had created before. Bolder, more confident, more technically sophisticated. The difference between an artist worried about the cost of paint and an artist free to experiment without constraint was evident in every brushstroke. "These are incredible, Emma, really incredible. You've improved so much in just a few months." Emma continued painting, adding subtle shadows to Elena's curtains. Having time and resources tends to accelerate artistic development. Victoria picked up one of Emma's sketchbooks from Paris, flipping through pages of cafe scenes and street portraits. "You were in Paris for a month?" "I was." "That must have been amazing. I've always wanted to visit Paris, but work has been so demanding, and with the wedding planning for next year, international travel just isn't practical right now." Emma turned to face her sister directly. "What do you want, Victoria?" Victoria set down the sketchbook and pulled a folded paper from her purse. Emma recognized it immediately as the type of formal document their parents preferred when they wanted to make their requests seem official and reasonable. "Mom and Dad asked me to bring this to you. They've been trying to reach you for months, but you haven't been responding to calls or emails." Emma wiped paint from her hands and accepted the document, scanning it quickly. It was a proposal for establishing a family trust, with Emma's inheritance as the primary funding source. The trust would supposedly benefit all family members, with distributions determined by a committee consisting of Roberto, Carmen, and Victoria. "They want me to put my inheritance into a family trust managed by the people who spent decades excluding me from family resources?" Emma summarized. Victoria shifted uncomfortably. "They're not trying to take your money, Emma. They're trying to help you manage it responsibly. None of us have experience with this kind of wealth. It makes sense to work together." Emma set the proposal aside without finishing it. "Victoria, do you remember when I was 17 and desperately wanted to attend that summer art intensive in Santa Fe?" "Vaguely. I had saved almost enough money from my part-time job, but I needed another $800 for travel and housing. I asked Mom and Dad for help, and they said the family budget couldn't accommodate that expense. They suggested I spend the summer working full-time instead to build character and work ethic." Victoria nodded slowly, clearly unsure where this was leading. "That same summer, you wanted to go to Europe with your college friends. The trip cost $3,000. They paid for it without hesitation and threw you a going-away party." Victoria's face flushed slightly. "Emma, I was in college. It was an educational opportunity." "And my art intensive wasn't educational?" "That's different. I was studying international business. The trip was relevant to my career goals." Emma laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Do you hear yourself right now? You're still doing it. You're still justifying why your opportunities were more valuable than mine." Victoria sat down heavily in the chair Emma kept for visitors. I don't know how to have this conversation with you anymore. Everything I say seems to make you angrier. I'm not angry, Victoria. I'm clear. Maybe for the first time in my life, I'm completely clear about what happened in our family and why it happened. Emma returned to her painting, adding final details to the window frame that had taken her weeks to perfect. The reason you don't know how to have this conversation is because we've never actually had it before. We've had the conversation where you make excuses and I accept them. We've had the conversation where you minimize the inequality and I let you. We've had the conversation where you play victim about my reactions to being treated as less important than you. But we've never had the conversation where we both acknowledge the truth. What truth? That you were the favored child, that you benefited enormously from that favoritism, and that you never once questioned whether it was fair or right. Victoria was quiet for a long time, studying her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to question it. It was just how things were in our family. You seemed so independent, so capable of handling everything on your own. I thought that's what you wanted. What I wanted was parents who saw my achievements as worthy of celebration. What I wanted was a family that supported my dreams with the same enthusiasm they showed for yours. What I wanted was a sister who noticed when I was struggling and offered help instead of assuming I preferred to struggle alone. I can't change the past, Emma. No, you can't. But you can stop trying to perpetuate the same patterns in the present. Emma gestured toward the family trust proposal. This document is a perfect example. Mom and Dad want to control my inheritance the same way they controlled every other family resource. They want to make decisions about my money the same way they made decisions about my education, my opportunities, my future. And they sent you here to convince me it's reasonable, the same way you always served as their messenger when they wanted something from me. Victoria picked up the proposal and read through it more carefully. I didn't really look at the details before. I just agreed to bring it to you because they seemed so worried about your financial decisions. What financial decisions exactly are they worried about? The studio rental, the trip to Paris, the fact that you quit your job at the frame shop without having another job lined up. Emma set down her paintbrush and turned to face Victoria fully. I quit my job because I no longer need to work jobs I hate to survive. I rented this studio because I'm finally able to prioritize my art. I went to Paris because Grandma Elena specifically wanted me to have that experience. These aren't reckless financial decisions. These are the choices of someone who finally has the freedom to live according to her own values. But what about long-term security? What about saving for retirement, building equity, planning for the future? Emma smiled genuinely for the first time since Victoria had arrived. I have more retirement security right now than most people accumulate in their entire working lives.
The investment income alone from Grandma Elena's portfolio is more than I used to make in a year at the frame shop. I could live comfortably for the rest of my life without touching the principal. Victoria stared at her sister as if seeing her for the first time. You really don't need anything from us anymore, do you? I never needed anything from you, Victoria. I needed parents who valued me equally. I needed a family that supported my dreams. I needed people who saw my potential and invested in it. But I never needed money or material support specifically from you. Then why does it feel like you're punishing us? Why does it feel like you're using this inheritance to hurt the family? Emma considered the question carefully. I'm not using the inheritance to hurt anyone. I'm using it to finally live authentically. The fact that my authentic life doesn't revolve around family obligation and doesn't prioritize your comfort over my own well-being isn't punishment. It's just reality. Victoria stood up and walked to the large window overlooking the street. Below them, the arts district bustled with activity. Galleries, studios, cafes filled with creative people pursuing their passions. It was a world Victoria had never really understood or valued, but seeing Emma's work in this context made it impossible to dismiss as impractical dreaming. Mom is really struggling with this, Victoria said quietly. She keeps saying she doesn't understand where she went wrong as a mother. She feels like you're rejecting everything she tried to teach you about family values and responsibility. What she's struggling with, Emma replied, is the loss of control. For 26 years, she could influence my choices through financial pressure and emotional manipulation. She could steer me toward the life she wanted for me by limiting my options and making me dependent on family approval. Now she can't do that anymore, and it's forcing her to confront the reality that I might not choose the life she would have chosen for me. Emma began cleaning her brushes, a signal that the conversation was nearing its end. As for family values, Victoria, what values exactly did she teach me? That some children matter more than others? That dreams are only valid if they're practical and profitable? That love is conditional on compliance and gratitude? Victoria turned away from the window, tears visible in her eyes for the first time. She did love you, Emma. She does love you. She just didn't know how to show it in ways that made sense to you. Maybe that's true, Emma acknowledged. But love that doesn't translate into supportive action isn't very useful to the person who needs it. And love that comes with constant demands to be someone you're not isn't really love for you. It's love for who they want you to be. Victoria picked up her purse, preparing to leave. What should I tell them about the trust proposal? Tell them that I'm managing my inheritance exactly as Grandma Elena intended. Tell them that I'm building a life that honors her investment in my potential. Tell them that I'm finally free to become the person I was meant to be, and that's not negotiable. Victoria paused at the door. Will we ever have a normal family relationship again? Emma considered the question seriously. Define normal. If you mean the relationship where I accommodate everyone else's needs and expectations while my own are ignored, then no. If you mean a relationship where we treat each other as equals and respect each other's choices, then maybe. But that would require you to stop viewing my independence as a rejection of you. I don't know how to do that. Start by accepting that my choices aren't about you. When I moved to this studio, I wasn't trying to show off or make you feel bad about your living situation. I was creating the workspace I needed to develop as an artist. When I went to Paris, I wasn't trying to make the family look bad for never traveling internationally. I was fulfilling a dream that Grandma Elena specifically wanted me to pursue. Victoria nodded slowly. So my feelings about your choices aren't actually relevant to your decision-making process. Exactly. Just like your feelings about my art were never relevant to whether I should pursue it professionally. Victoria opened the door to leave, then turned back one more time. For what it's worth, Emma, I'm starting to understand that we never really knew you at all. The person I thought was my quiet, accommodating little sister was actually someone much stronger and more determined than any of us realized. I wasn't stronger, Emma corrected. I was surviving. There's a difference between strength and endurance. Now I'm finally in a position to be strong. After Victoria left, Emma returned to her painting, adding the final touches that would make it ready for her upcoming gallery showing. The exhibition would feature the work she had created since inheriting Elena's fortune, including several pieces directly inspired by her grandmother's hidden journals and the revelations about her family's financial deceptions. The gallery owner had been impressed enough with Emma's recent work to offer her a solo show, something she had dreamed about for years but never dared to pursue actively. The opening was scheduled for the following month, and Emma had invited everyone she wanted to celebrate with. Her guest list was notably short on family members, and notably long on the new friendships she had formed through her art. As the afternoon light shifted across her studio, Emma reflected on how completely her life had changed. 6 months ago, she had been trapped in patterns of accommodation and financial anxiety that kept her focused on survival rather than growth. She had been grateful for scraps of attention and support from family members who saw her as an obligation rather than a person deserving of investment. Now she woke up each morning excited about the creative work ahead of her. She made decisions based on her own values and priorities rather than other people's expectations. She spent time with people who appreciated her for who she actually was rather than who they wanted her to become. She had discovered that freedom wasn't just about having money. It was about having choices and having the confidence to make those choices without needing approval from people who had never understood her anyway.
Her phone buzzed with a text message, and Emma glanced at it, expecting to see follow-up communication from Victoria. Instead, it was from Marcus, the sculptor she had met at a gallery opening last week, asking if she wanted to join him for dinner and a discussion about collaborative work. Emma smiled and typed back her acceptance. This was what her new life looked like. Opportunities arising from mutual interest and respect rather than family obligation. Relationships built on shared passions rather than shared DNA. Choices made from abundance rather than scarcity. As Emma prepared to close the studio for the evening, she took a moment to look around at everything she had created in this space. The paintings that represented her artistic growth, the sculptures that explored themes she had never had time to develop before, the sketches and studies that documented her evolving vision as an artist. But more than the physical artwork, this studio represented something even more valuable. It represented the life she had built for herself when she finally had the resources and freedom to build according to her own design. Emma locked the studio and walked to her car, parked in the spot she rented monthly without worrying about the cost. As she drove through the city toward the restaurant where she would meet Marcus, she passed the apartment building where she used to live, the frame shop where she used to work, the coffee shop where she used to sit with her laptop applying for art grants she never received. All of it felt like someone else's life now.
Not a life she was running from, but a life she had outgrown. Like a snake shedding its skin, Emma had left behind the constraints that had shaped her for so long and emerged as someone entirely new. The restaurant was in a part of town Emma had rarely visited before, too expensive for her old budget, but perfectly comfortable for her new financial reality. Marcus was already there, studying the menu and making notes in a sketchbook, the kind of unconscious artistic behavior that had become Emma's normal social environment. Over dinner, they discussed the collaborative installation they were both excited to create, a piece that would combine Emma's painting techniques with Marcus's sculptural expertise, exploring themes of hidden identity and delayed recognition. As they talked, Emma realized that this was the first time in her life she was planning artistic work with someone who saw her as an equal collaborator rather than a hobbyist or assistant. "I've been following your work since that group show last month," Marcus said as they shared dessert. "There's something different about your recent pieces. More confident, more technically sophisticated, but also more emotionally honest." Emma smiled, thinking about how to explain the transformation without revealing too much personal information. "I had some life changes recently that gave me more freedom to experiment and take risks with my art." "Good for you. Too many artists get stuck in survival mode and never have the chance to really explore their potential." Emma nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "I was definitely in survival mode for a long time. It's amazing how different your work becomes when you're creating from inspiration rather than desperation." As they left the restaurant, Marcus mentioned a group of artists who met regularly to critique each other's work and discuss upcoming opportunities. Emma accepted his invitation to join them, realizing that she was building a professional artistic community for the first time in her life. Driving home, Emma thought about Victoria's question about whether they would ever have a normal family relationship. The truth was that Emma no longer wanted the relationship they had always had, and she wasn't sure her family was capable of the kind of relationship she would now find acceptable. But that was okay. She was building new relationships based on mutual respect and shared interests. She was creating chosen family with people who saw her value without needing years of proof or explanation. Emma's phone rang as she pulled into her driveway. She glanced at the caller ID and saw Uncle Miguel's name. Unlike her parents and Victoria, Miguel had respected her need for space after the inheritance revelation, sending only occasional text messages to check on her well-being without making demands or requests. "Hi, Uncle Miguel." "Emma, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to tell you about something I found in Elena's house today." Emma had been avoiding her grandmother's house, not ready to deal with the emotional weight of sorting through Elena's possessions. Miguel had volunteered to handle the practical aspects of the estate settlement. "I was going through her bedroom closet and found a box of letters addressed to you. They're dated over the past 5 years, but they were never mailed. I think Elena wrote them and kept them as a way of talking to you when she couldn't say these things in person." Emma pulled into her garage and sat in the car, processing this information. "What kind of letters?"
Letters about your art, your achievements, her pride in your character. Letters about her regrets regarding how your parents treated you. Letters about her hopes for your future. Emma, she documented every gallery showing you ever had, every award you received, every article about your work in the local paper. She kept everything. Tears filled Emma's eyes. Even during the years when Emma had felt most invisible and unappreciated, Elena had been paying attention, had been collecting evidence of her granddaughter's worth and potential. There's one letter in particular, Miguel continued, dated just 2 weeks before she died. She wrote about how proud she was that you never gave up on your art, despite getting no support from the family. She said watching you persist in pursuing your dreams against all odds convinced her that you were the right person to inherit her fortune. Emma wiped her eyes, grateful that Miguel couldn't see her crying. Can you bring them by my studio sometime this week? Of course. Emma, there's something else. Elena kept copies of rejection letters you received from galleries and grant applications. But she also kept copies of acceptance letters and positive reviews that I don't think your parents ever saw. What do you mean? I mean, Elena was tracking your career more carefully than anyone else in the family. She knew about opportunities you were offered, exhibitions you participated in, sales you made that apparently never got mentioned at family gatherings. Emma realized that her artistic career had been more successful than even she had understood. Living in survival mode, focused on the rejections and financial struggles, she had minimized her actual achievements, even to herself. Elena was proud of you, Emma, not just because of the inheritance, but because of who you became despite everything working against you. She saw your real strength, your real talent, your real character. After ending the call, Emma sat in her car thinking about the grandmother who had loved her so completely while maintaining the family fiction that she was just a simple widow living on Social Security. Elena had been conducting a decades-long project of documenting Emma's worth, building a case for her value that went far beyond money. Inside her house, Emma walked through rooms that she had furnished according to her own taste rather than budget constraints. Comfortable furniture, adequate lighting, space for both living and working. Simple luxuries that represented the difference between surviving and thriving. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat at the kitchen table where she did her planning and correspondence. Tomorrow, she would meet with the gallery owner to finalize details for her upcoming show. Next week, she would start the collaborative project with Marcus. Next month, she would travel to New Mexico to visit the art intensive program she had missed as a teenager, this time as a donor rather than a desperate applicant. All of it was possible because Elena had seen her potential and invested in it when no one else would. Emma opened her laptop and began typing an email to the arts intensive program in Santa Fe. She wanted to establish a scholarship fund for young artists whose families couldn't or wouldn't support their creative development. Artists like she had been. Artists who needed someone to believe in their potential when everyone else saw only impracticality and expense. As she wrote about the scholarship requirements and funding structure, Emma realized that this was how generational change actually happened, not through confrontation or revenge, but through creating better opportunities for the next person facing similar challenges. She would call the scholarship fund the Elena Martinez Memorial Award for Emerging Artists. Each year, it would provide full funding for young people whose artistic dreams exceeded their financial resources, whose families couldn't understand the value of creative education, whose potential was waiting for someone to recognize and invest in it. Emma finished the email and sent it, then walked to her bedroom where she kept Elena's photograph on her nightstand. The young woman with the paintbrush smiled back at her, frozen in a moment of pure artistic joy. "I'm finally brave enough, Grandma," Emma whispered to the photograph. "I'm brave enough to follow both our dreams." Outside her window, the city lights twinkled like stars, and Emma fell asleep planning the future she was finally free to create. A future built on her own terms, funded by love that had been waiting decades to be revealed, supported by people who chose to see her value instead of people who had to be convinced of it. The inheritance had given her money, but more importantly, it had given her permission to become herself. And for the first time in 26 years, that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.